Every worshipping actions and Islamic manners, all Quranic commands Allah wants us to learn through Hadith, the teachings of Prophet Muhammad, and Muslims required to follow teachings of last Prophet Muhammad. Let me tell you, Quran, Hadith and Sunnah, as much Muslims have in the routines of their life, that much they are followers of Islam. Regardless, Muslims gain any knowledge about Islam, but if knowledge and practice are not according to the teachings of Prophet Muhammad, then person never be able to come on the straight path. Don't forget, only practice count in the sight of Allah, and they need to perform precisely their worshipping actions, to obey Allah. With a pure intention, Muslims should learn how to worship and remember Allah. That comes from the Quran and teachings of Prophet Muhammad, and that is called Hadiths. Why we don't have to follow only Quran? Such as when Allah says in the Holy Quran, "Remember me, when you wake up," in the remembrance of Allah. What supplication to say? It is not mentioned in the Quran. Hadith tells us before going to bed to recite every night 2 Surah 32 and 67 to get the protection of suffering and punishment of the grave. It is not mentioned in the Quran. Hadith tells us to get protection from Satan, jinns, and evil dreams. Some special instructions required to perform into 3 sets. Read the Surah 112-113-114 3 times, then read the strongest verse of Quran, Ayatul Kursi chapter 2 verse 255, and also read 285 and 286 before going to sleep. It is not mentioned in Quran. All the actions of Prophet Muhammad were for his followers, not for him only, who could not read and write and was raised in a desert, the city of Makkah, over 1400 years ago. How the Prophet was able to set the precise and powerful laws and system for Muslims around the world if it was not from divine power, Allah the Almighty Creator. Today, living in this modern era, how the Muslims able to practice the Islamic manners and require accuracy to apply for their worshipping activities around the world, and that is the only source of the Quran and Hadiths. Hadith tells us, lying down supplication to read for sleeping time. It is not mentioned in the Quran. Hadith tells us, the supplication to change the position during sleep, did not indicate in the Holy Quran. Hadith tells us the supplication after waking up. Prophet used to recite waking up supplication, and after in sitting position used to recite 10 verses of Holy Quran, Surah 3 Al-Imran from 190 to 200. It is not mentioned in Quran. Hadith tells us the supplication of wearing and taking off the garment. It is not mentioned in the Quran. Hadith tells us entering the washroom supplication and enters with the left foot. It is not mentioned in the Quran. Hadith teaches us to keep clean and purify ourselves according to the laws of Allah, which helpful and beneficial for the people in this modern era and up to last day of this world. Regardless, Muslim are living anywhere in the world because of Hadith. Practicing Muslims are cautious about their cleanness for their worshipping duties towards Allah. When someone using a toilet seat at public washrooms, they need to dry the seat with toilet paper, or they can put the toilet paper on the seat to prevent the germs of contagious diseases such as COVID-19, AIDS, and many other diseases as well. As we know, urinate is very unhygienic. Many people are careless about it. They urinate in a standing position, which is unsafe for the purity of clothes and body, unless someone has health conditions. Still, person have to be careful from drops of urine. All these routines of life explained in Hadith. It is not mentioned in the Quran. Hadith tells us after urinating, or feces, to clean, use only the left hand, not mentioned in the Quran. Regardless, the cleanest of the washrooms, still, Muslims have to clean the seat, and after using the toilet paper, and still they have to wash themselves with water for their cleaning. Hadith teaches us whether Muslims live in deserts, or anywhere, if the water is not available, they have to use the small pebble stones. After they have to clean with the water, when it's available they must wash. It is not mentioned in Quran. Hadith tells us hands must be washed properly with water and pure dry sand, or today, we use soaps, and we have to make sure to protect our clothes from the drops of urine and feces. Affected parts of clothes must be clean with water. It is not mentioned in the Quran. Hadith tells us how to perform a marriage ceremony. Nikah is not mentioned in the Quran. Hadith tells us the supplication of before touching the spouse. It is not mentioned in the Quran. Hadith tells us to take a bath with specific requirements after sleeping with a spouse. It is not mentioned in the Quran how to take bath specific ways. Hadith tells us supplication to start the ablution and how to perform the ablution. When you start using the water as required for wudu, you are not allowed to waste the water. Start the ablution with Bismillah. Don't forget wudu required rubbing properly of your required body parts to be washed for wudu. First clean your hands with soap or sand. Then clean mouth with a specific wooden stick, miswak, finger, or toothbrush. Take the water, wash the mouth and nose same time, repeat 3 times, clean the nose with tiny finger after wash and rub the whole face 3 times, then wash hands over up to the elbows with the water 3 times and also rub the elbows. Take little water and rub the head down to neck once, it's called musha. Again wet your hands to clean the ears with specific manners and wash the feet over the heels. Details of wudu is not mentioned in Quran. Hadith tells us ablution is not valid if the person passes the gas, urinate, and feces. Usually at the workplace it is difficult to wash the feet for wudu, but as long person wears the socks without any hole for the each wudu person can wet his right hand and wipes over the socks 1 time from toes to heels, which is sufficient for 24 hours. Hadith tells us the supplication after performing the ablution. It is not mentioned in the Quran. In Quran it's not mentioned how to make wudu and also how to pray and how many rakat to pray. Muslims around the world have the same accurate practice of the religion from hadiths, not mentioned in the Quran. Hadith tells us supplication after leaving the washroom and uses the right foot to go out of the toilet. It is not mentioned in the Quran. Hadith tells us on Friday, take a detailed bath, cut the nails, and remove the hair from armpits and around the private parts below the navel. It is not mentioned in the Quran. Hadith tells us supplication is going out of the home. It is not mentioned in the Quran. Hadith tells us supplication is going to the masjid. Wear clean and best perfume clothes. It is not mentioned in the Quran. The Prophet told the manners of the masjid, don't come into masjid if you have eaten onion or garlic. Hadith tells us the supplication of entering masjid using the right foot. It is not mentioned in the Quran. Hadith tells us in the prayers reciting Surah Fatiha is obligated, otherwise salah will be not valid. Hadith tells us when entering a masjid and must perform 2 rakats, Fatul Masjid. It is not mentioned in the Quran. Hadith tells us if you wish to pray 2 rakats after ablution calls Fatul Wudu. It is not mentioned in the Quran. Hadith tells us after prayer supplications and leaving masjid. It is not mentioned in the Quran. Hadith tells us the supplication of entering in the marketplace is not mentioned in the Quran. Hadith tells us the supplication of entering the home by using the right foot and saying salam. It is not mentioned in the Quran. Hadith tells us the Prophet always used to wash his hands and clean his mouth and nose after entering the home. We learn protection of our health from this sunnah, the action of the Prophet. It is not mentioned in the Quran. Hadith tells us supplication for drinking water in a sitting position. It is not mentioned in the Quran. Hadith tells us supplications of start and finishing food and the manners of sitting and eating food. The last Prophet Muhammad used to sit on the floor and eat with the right hand. It is not mentioned in the Quran. Hadith tells us call for prayers azan 5 times a day and supplication dua after azan is not mentioned in the Quran. Hadith tells us about the birth of the newborn baby, and gives azan in the right ear. It is not mentioned in the Quran. Hadith tells us to sacrifice the animal after the baby is born, akikah. For boy 2 and for girl 1 animal, if anyone can afford. And also for a baby boy requires a circumcise. And shaving the head is not mentioned in the Quran. Hadith tells us man should perform his prayers 5 times a day in masjid in a group jamath with straight line, otherwise prayer will not be accepted. It is not mentioned in the Quran. Hadith tells us the importance of preparation for Friday prayers. To pray in masjid, and every Muslim have to attend Friday prayers in the masjid, and person must have to listen the complete speech quietly, even cannot say salam to each other, and should not travel before the Friday prayers unless person must know where he is going to pray Friday prayers. It is not mentioned in the Quran. Hadith tells us before making any decisions, or deciding any matters, or dealing any important matter, pray 2 rakats for Salatul Istikhara, dua, isn't mentioned in the Quran. These are a few examples of hadiths, and there is a lot more to learn about Islamic laws of requirements, such as hadith tells us after the month of Ramadan to celebrate the Eid al-Fitr. On Eid day recite specific supplication and perform the prayer with family regardless ladies in conditions to pray or not. They have to pray in open ground or Grand Jamia Masjid with particular actions. It's not mentioned in the Quran how to perform both Eid prayer. Hadith tells us, that is not mentioned in Quran when someone accepts the Islam, what commitment he has to give to Allah.
Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh.
It means I will worship Allah alone and I will follow last Prophet Muhammad teachings only for my guidance. It is not mentioned in the Holy Quran. After accepting Islam, most important pillar of Islam is the Salah, the first essential pillar of Islam, accepting the oneness of Allah the Almighty Creator without associating any partner, and have believed in Prophet Muhammad as the last prophet of Allah, and after believe on Allah and his Prophet Muhammad, it is obligatory for Muslims to practice the Islam, to pray 5 times a day, and give zakat once a year if person is financially eligible, and give charity, fast in month of Ramadan, Hajj if anyone can afford, and Umrah, etc. Hadith explained to us all these most important worshipping actions and their details. As Hadith tells us how to pray Salah, the first required intention to begin the prayer. Say Allahu Akbar if you don't have intention of the prayer and realization of time of the prayer, and if you don't say Allahu Akbar, your prayer is not valid. And required repeating to say Allahu Akbar for changing each action during the prayer, such as going to bowing position. In this position say specific words to glorify Allah the Almighty Creator, and after bowing, in standing position also required specific terms to glorify Allah, the Almighty Creator, then repeat Allahu Akbar. For going to prostrate position required particular manners, in this position, again have specific words to glorify Allah, the Almighty Creator, and perform the prostrate twice with Allahu Akbar. All these details are from Hadith which is not mentioned in the Quran. Hadith tells us the timings of starting and finishing Salah and the performance of the prayer. Salah, to start the Salah, raise the hands up to the shoulders and say Allahu Akbar. Your eyes should be focusing the place of sajda and also in the ruku position. And Hadith teaches us the prescribed accuracy in the movements of the Salah, and also Hadith teaches us don't run to catch the Jamath of the prayer when a person joins the Jamath. If the Imam in ruku position, first person has to stand in line with the intention of Salah calmly and say Allahu Akbar. Then again say Allahu Akbar, go to ruku position. Before Imam raises from ruku position, if you are able to glorify Allah once in your ruku position, you didn't miss your rukat, and if you miss the ruku, you miss the rukat, or if you miss any rukat after finishing Salah by Imam without saying Salam, you have to stand up to continue the missing rukats by saying Allahu Akbar and recite only Surah Fatiha and missing each rukat. Joining the Jamaat, if the Imam in Sajda first make the intention say Allahu Akbar, then second Allahu Akbar for Sajda, your rukat won't count because you missed the obligatory action ruku. If you are praying more than 2 rakats and you forget to sit in second rakat for Tashahhud and you stand by mistake, you cannot go back to Tashahhud position, otherwise you will break your Salah, and any missing action you cannot go back to cover your missing action, or you can repeat your Salah. End of the Salah you have to make 2 sajda sahau for mistakes. These details are not mentioned in the Quran. Hadith tells us to sit in the second rakat for the performance of more than 2 rakats. After prostrate in sitting position required specific supplication and sitting manners. And this is sunnah. Then raise the first finger of right hand to witness Allah, and we acknowledge the Almighty Creator is the only one source for all the sources of all the existence, and we mention Prophet Muhammad is his slave and his last messenger. All these important instructions and actions of prayer are not mentioned in the Quran. Hadith tells us, after witnessing Allah, the Almighty Creator, and we verify about the Prophet Muhammad as last messenger of Allah, at the end of the prayer, then we must have to send salutations, du'at and salam, to last Prophet Muhammad. O Allah, bestow your favor on Muhammad and the family of Muhammad as you supported blessed Prophet Abraham and his family. All prophets such as Moses and Jesus, peace be upon them, you are praiseworthy, most glorious. O Allah, bless Muhammad and family of Muhammad as you have blessed Abraham and family of Abraham, you're praiseworthy, most glorious. It was not mentioned in the Quran. If someone did not send a salutation in his prayer, the whole prayer will not be valid. It is not mentioned in the Quran. Hadith tells us before finishing prayer what to read and how to complete the prayer with 2 salam, turning face first right shoulder and then left. It is not mentioned in the Quran. Hadith tells us to complete the last prayers of the day, which required a specific way and long supplications at the end of rakat called witre in odds numbers performed by the last Prophet Muhammad. Sometime he used to perform 1 or 3 and 5. It is not mentioned in the Quran. Hadith tells us to prostrate, sajda, when we are reciting certain verses of Quran and we read specific supplication, which taught by the last Prophet Muhammad. It is sunnah. If anyone does it has reward. It is not mentioned in the Quran. Hadith tells us how to perform the midnight prayers 4, 6, or 8 rakats with long recitation of Quran and long bowing, ruku, and prostrating, sajda, with glorifying praises of Allah called tahajjud. It is not mentioned in the Quran. There are many guidance tips and supplications given by the Prophet for daily life routines. which are not mentioned in the Quran. Hadith tells us the details of ablution. If the water is not available, Quran says clean with a pure dry sand called tayammum. How to purify and how to perform ablution without the water. It is not mentioned in Quran. Hadith tells us the details of charity, how much we have to give and what type of status required for give charity. It is not mentioned in the Quran. Hadith tells us about the details of obligatory fasting in the month of Ramadan and non-obligatory fasting around the year, such as Monday and Thursday, every Islamic months on the dates of 13, 14, and 15 and month of Muharram on 9th and 10th and 10 days of Hajj. The Quran says when you are fasting, stop eating and drinking, but the Prophet explained, Allah doesn't need your hunger or thirst if you did not stop cheating and lying. Complete details of fasting are not mentioned in the Quran. Hadith tells us supplication after opening the fast, and some conditions and explanation of fasting when it's not valid, not mentioned in the Quran. Hadith tells us to perform extra prayers of 8 rakats after the last prayer of the day in Ramadan. Most of the Muslims try to read even 20 or more rakats. They try to finish the complete Quran once, twice or more, and in their prayers also during the month of Ramadan to gain extra rewards or blessings and pleasure of Allah. Hadith tells us the more details of fasting which are not mentioned in the Holy Quran. When the Muslims scholars give their opinions about any confusion of any Islamic issues, they have to check and follow the Quran and Hadith regardless where they live in the world, and they all depend on the references of Quran and Hadith for over 1400 years. As Hadith teaches us, fasting is the training program for Muslims to build their patience to practice the Islam and deal with the worldly affairs for the entire year. It is not mentioned in the Quran. Hadith tells us about the most beneficial 10 nights of Ramadan to search for one of the special night which worship is equal to 1,000 months. It is not mentioned in the Quran. Every single hadith and teachings and actions of Prophet are full of wisdom which teaches us the manners and way of life according to the requirements of Islam, to obey Allah, the Almighty Creator. If we don't follow exactly any worshipping method and actions taught by Prophet, it cannot be acceptable by Allah. If Muslim tries to apply worshipping actions with his understanding from Quran or change any law, which set by the last Prophet Muhammad, then the person will be seeking hellfire. Hadith tells us about the handling the person at the time of death and supplications to read. It is not mentioned in the Quran. Hadith tells us how to wash the dead body and wrap the body in a shroud and perform the prayers and how to bury the dead body. It is not mentioned in the Quran. Angel Gabriel used to deliver the revelation of the Holy Quran, and he taught each command of the Quran and Hadith to last Prophet Muhammad, and also taught the implementation and explanation of Quran, Hadiths, and Sunnah in the daily routines of our life, and they are also the revelation from Allah the Almighty Creator. How we can ignore the Hadith books, which teaches to Muslims the understanding and implementation of the Quran in their life. When Prophet Muhammad used to receive the revelation of Quran, and he conveyed to his companions, they used to write down precisely at the same time of revelation. They always had a curiosity about how to apply the commands of Allah in their life, and they wanted to learn from the last Prophet Muhammad how to follow the commands of Allah. As we know, all the explanation and teachings of last Prophet Muhammad calls Hadith. Islam is the fastest continuously growing religion around the world. The Holy Quran requirement was to compile into books form. Similarly, collections of Hadith had to put in the books form in order to follow the Islam accurately as required. Hadith tells us read Quran as much as possible and search Laylatul Qadr in odds nights in last 10 days of Ramadan, and Hadith tells us the 10 days of Hajj have a similar reward, like the last 10 nights of Ramadan. Hadith tells us that how to perform Hajj and Umrah, which supplications to read during Hajj. It is not mentioned in the Quran. Fasting is equal to fast 1 year, and on the day of Arafat every Muslim has to sacrifice the animal whoever can afford, regardless performing Hajj or not. This day called Eid al-Adha, also required to glorify Allah, the Almighty Creator, Allahu Akbar, loudly saying by every Muslim when they go to prayer for celebrations of Eid, and all the Muslims have to perform the prayer with specific actions. The laws of Allah the Almighty Creator, which presented in the Holy Quran, but those laws explained by the Hadiths. The followers of Islam are following Hadith to understand the Holy Quran, since it revealed. All the Muslims follow the Hadiths worldwide regardless where they live: Australia, China, India, USA, Europe and Africa, etc. Over 1400 years the last Prophet Muhammad is not with Muslims, but Holy Quran and Hadith books are with believers. The true Muslims always follow the Islam with the teachings of the last Prophet Muhammad, the Holy Quran explanation and understanding through the Hadith books, around the world. Last Prophet Muhammad set the Sharia, the Islamic constitution, from the commands of Quran and Hadith. Before Prophet's death, no one have rights to remove the Hadith from the Muslims' actions any era until the last day of this world. The details of Quran and Sharia explained in Hadith by last Prophet Muhammad over 1400 years ago. All the Islamic courts' judgments based on Holy Quran and Hadith books around the world. All Islamic laws researched and collected by Prophet companions, carefully recorded, and scholars put the Hadiths in books form with a precise accuracy, and these Hadith collections preserved by the great companions and scholars since Islam came. Millions of scholars studied Sharia laws. Scholar cannot graduate without learning the Quran and Hadith, regardless scholar belong to any set of Islam. Allah, the Almighty Creator, protected the Quran and gives the ability to memorize the whole Quran by millions, from the age of 5 to 70 years old in the original Quranic Arabic language. Don't forget there are over 6,000 verses in the Quran, and also read by close to billions of reciters every day regardless. Muslims speak any language and belong to any countries such as America, China, France, Germany, India, Pakistan, Russia, and other hundreds of different other languages speak by Muslims around the world. And how to apply Quranic laws of Islam by Muslim nations around the world. The explanations and details called hadiths, which also protected through the memorization, scholars, and books are same way the Holy Quran protected by Allah.
من يطع الرسول فقد أطاع الله ومن تولى فما أرسلناك عليهم حفيظا.
Whoever obeys the messenger has truly obeyed Allah. But whoever turns away, then know that we have not sent you, O Prophet, as a keeper over them.
For more informative videos, please do subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon for all upcoming videos notification. Like this video and share with your family and friends.
I suggest you to read Quran in your language for more understanding of Almighty God Allah.